Okay, we're going to talk about the weapons dictionary, and you can see I've already unfolded the default weapon here in the root. And if you want to turn your Bibles, turn your documentation to the weapons chapter. Here it is, and we'll go forward one. There's only just one section inside of here. It just says weapons dictionary, and let's get started. Okay, so there's a couple ways that you can give your characters a weapon. Obviously, there's the default method, which in your characters dictionary you can just put in here use weapon and then match that value to the weapons dictionary name. So default weapon was the name of that one, and the character will immediately start off with that particular weapon. Another option is to go into your collectibles dictionary, define a weapon like, say, throwing sword here, and then on a per level basis, you could tuck that that collectible into the level somewhere. Okay, so the same way that you kind of set up any of your other collectibles, and then what you want to do is just have that collectible key name match that of the weapon. Okay, so if we were going to put throwing sword on the level, we would just put throwing sword right here. And then there's another option here called amount added to inventory, and if that was going to be a weapon, you'd probably want to give them, an appropriate amount of it. All right, so if it's grenades, maybe 10 of them. If it's going to be a pistol or something like that, 30 rounds, whatever it is. And optionally, you have a decision to make here. You can require ammo or not. So you could, in theory, just add one of that particular weapon to the inventory, and if it requires ammo is set to no, then they just have an unlimited supply of it. If it requires ammo is set to yes, then their inventory is going to go down over time for that particular weapon. All right, now the depth, you do get to pick out whether or not the rounds that you're firing of this weapon visibly appear over top of the character. If you guys remember, the characters all come in at a default depth of 100. So that weapon being put at 99 is going to be visibly below, by just 1 degree, the character. And then your collision body type, this could be circle or square. You can resize the border, the collision border, by a decimal amount. So 0.5 is going to be 50%. 1 would just be 100%. So the collision shape would take up the entire size of the bullet image in there. And I think 0.5 works for this particular one. Might not work for you. And then location offset up. All right, so we have up, down, right, left, and resting. These are going to be positions that the weapon starts at, based on the direction the character's at. All right, so otherwise the weapon would just by default just be placed right in the middle of the character as soon as it begins to fire, and then move out from there. But you can offset that a little bit, and 10 and negative 10 is not much, but it looks a lot better if in a situation like the first demo level here has the character crouching down. It's not much, but you do kind of notice that, oh, wait a minute, that weapon was firing from the same spot when he was standing up as he was crouching down, so that's a reason to do that. And then vector, if character faces up, down, left, right, or resting. These are going to be the actual direction and speed, essentially, that the weapon fires in. So 10 and 3, if the character is facing up, and this was a side-scrolling board, so if the character is facing up, which really just means he's standing up or jumping up, then we have 10 and then 3, so it kind of goes a little bit upward. And then for the other ones, you can see that negative 10 and 10, those are kind of obvious. You're not firing anywhere upwards on the y-axis, but you're firing only on the x-axis. And then vector, if character faces down. This one I just left at 10 and 0. So again, crouching is considered down on this particular weapon and this particular character. So this weapon is kind of set up to be used with a side-scrolling character, in other words. And the kit knows that if the character is facing up or down, but or is going up or down, but facing toward the opposite direction, left, it knows to reverse. So this would be -10 in those cases. And then firing causes character to stop. We talked about that in the characters dictionary. That gives the effect that the character's kind of firing a big weapon or something like that. You can make them stop while they fire it, and that is completely optional. That's up to you. I had it set to yes, but if you want to have that set to no, then obviously they keep moving as they fire. Tapered down vector after how long? Okay, so if you're on a gravity-less board, all right, or if you have affected by gravity set to no, you can put in here another way of slowing down. There it is. Slowing down the weapon over time, and if you don't want to do that, just put in a high number here. I think actually if you put in 0, it doesn't taper it down, and then remove after how long. So this would be the time at which it can stay on the level without hitting anything, and then it'll just blow up on its own, basically. And you might want to do that if you have a level that the character can possibly just fire an infinite amount in. So, for example, if you have a boundaryless board and the weapon is never going to collide with anything, if it got shot off, just off into the distance or something like that, you should put this number in here. You definitely just put it in here anyway. Otherwise, you could potentially just load up the scene with unused weapons, and that's no fun. Affected by gravity, so you can have it that be yes or no, and obviously that would be an extra pull down on the taper. And then restitution, that's the balancingness of it. The mass, I just put this at 1 by default. And then you can also put in a density there too. Max at once. All right, so this is the max number of those weapons that can exist in the scene. And 20 is quite a lot. You might want to lower that a little bit. So, if it was a kind of a specialty weapon or something like that, maybe you can only fire 1 at a time, like a grenade. Bullets, maybe just 5 to 10 is probably pretty good. Again, I left that kind of high. Allows rotation. No, but that's a good property for things like a throwing sword. I set that to yes because it's certainly a lot of fun when the object is rotating around. And then let's see, where did we off over here? There it is. Disable firing down. So you have all these options to not allow the character to fire during certain times. So if the character's facing up, left, right, you can disable all of those. Particle file name. This occurs when the weapon breaks. So and you can add that in with an animation as well. So that's a nice little extra effect. So you could have like a cartoonish explosion, but also throw in there some smoke or something like that as well. And then that says remove particles after how long, so that's 2 seconds. And then you've got the option to put in the number of particles to emit. And that's a relatively low number, but I thought it worked well for this weapon, and it didn't kind of tax the scene essentially with putting a ton of particles in there. And then particle offset X and Y, you can offset the amount of offset where the particle occurs in relation to the center of the ammo. Keep adding vectors to particles. That's a fun one. What a specific one too. Yes or no? All right, so what would happen here is this basically controls whether or not once the ammo or the weapon explodes or is removed, whether or not we keep adding these amounts to it. All right, and if this is set to no, then it's just kind of a dead stop at that point, which makes sense. All right, that looks fine too, because the weapon has hit something like a wall, and the explosion or whatever might occur just right against that wall. Or you can set this to yes, and what that kind of appears like is that the bullet or whatever hits something, and then the particles keep going off like this in that direction or whatever it is. So I'd just say try both of them and see which one you like more. And then of course your fire sound and then your hit sound. So the fire sound is going to be, in this case, if it's a gun, it's going to be, gun. Explosion for the hit sound. And this kind of putting the sound in here is, you might have noticed in our characters dictionary we didn't actually have an attack sound set up, although that you do have that option. But what I did is I removed it and then kind of basically am using this instead. Okay. And then damage to objects. This is how much damage the weapon will do. Obviously, you can have 1 in here, but you can put in any number of damage points. And then can collect. This is a fun one. So I think I've mentioned this before. You can have something like a boomerang, and that can be used to collect items. Now, you're not going to see the boomerang come back. That's not something I've programmed in yet, but just to give you an example, you can have something that shoots out that is used as a collection device. And, this might also be used in a game that has nothing to do with military guys shooting things. I don't want to pigeonhole the kit to that. You could have a nice little kids-friendly game, and certain things are used, like a bubble or a balloon, to collect things. And otherwise, if that's set to no, then the weapon or whatever it is just going to travel through a collectible object. And then the last thing in here that we've got, or not the last thing, we've got ignore collisions that don't damage. So that's things like your boundaries, whether or not you want the weapon to just go safely through them, or whether or not you want the weapon to break when they hit those boundaries. And what you might want to do is have like a really big boundary. Let's see if I've got my tile filed up here to illustrate that a little bit better. And we'll just open this up in tile if I can. Okay, so in fact, let's go over here and use level 1. So this has a boundary over here, right? Which is pretty close to where the character starts at, obviously. So if the character just turned around and fired to the left, and the object was set to not ignore boundaries, then you're going to see an explosion like right here. But what you might want to do is pull your boundary out further, and then that way there's no chance that the user is ever going to see that the weapon exploded against the boundary over here. But that's also a way to kind of cut down on the amount of just miscellaneous fire that's going on in the scene. If people love to hit buttons and fire things, so that those weapons could fire on and on and on out this way until they run into or until they're set to automatically explode. But ideally, you kind of get rid of them as quick as possible. And again, that's ignore collisions that don't damage. And then you've got an animation hit dictionary, and you put in here your size, your frame rate, your atlas file, and then the frame order, and you've got yourself a nice little animation that occurs when the weapon explodes. And this kind of just looks like a glassy effect. I'll step through it a little bit. It's just kind of looks like this. And what you're seeing is, of course, the standard definition frames, and then the high definition frames. And of course, the guide talks about setting up texture atlas files, but really this is just a folder with the name .atlas at the end of it. Dropped it into Xcode, and that's all you got to do. Just be sure you include in here your standard definition names, and then the same name with @2x in there. And when you're actually defining the frames, you don't need to put in the .png part of it. So those are just the base frame names. You don't put in @2x or anything like that inside of here. And then, of course, your atlas file just points to that name right there. And again, that also does not have the file extension. At no point anywhere in the property list do you put in the file extension. Okay, so then is there anything else? Well, there just happens to be one more thing. So let's go into our throwing sword. In the movements dictionary, you can put in here, this is one option, rotates forever with duration. So if you do have allows rotation in here, you can also put in here a rotates forever with duration, which is just going to spin the weapon automatically. If you didn't put that in here, the weapon could potentially spin when it collided with something. But by default, it's not. There's not going to be any rotation added to it. So this adds that rotation to it, and a decimal number in here makes it rotate around pretty fast. But you could put a high number in there, 5, 10, or something like that. Then it would take 10 seconds to do one entire rotation. And then I believe we've got no, it's not in here, but it is in the weapons dictionary in the documentation. You can put in inside of the movements dictionary these options as well. Move X amount. Move X amount for how long, a random start direction on the X. So in the side scroller level, that moving the weapon on the X amount probably won't ever show up, because that's moving the weapon back and forth like this. But moving a Y amount, so when you fire a weapon, if it were to go traveling up and down as it's traveling left or right, because on a side scrolling level you're mostly just firing left and right that you would actually end up seeing that, and that could so what it might potentially, or no, what it will do is give you a zigzaggy type motion like that, and that could be good for a character that is just a little bit more difficult to avoid their weapons. I don't see it being that fun for the character shooting, but more for enemies. And then I didn't mention this. You can also put in here CCW inside of your rotates forever. CCW with duration, so that's a counterclockwise movement. And then the random start direction. So a yes or no value to randomly change which way the Y movement goes first. So if you were firing multiple weapons, one right after another, some of them might start by going up this way, some of them might start by going down that way. And so there you go. A little description on that. This could be fun too. I kind of want to elaborate on it a little bit. So let's say you had a kind of a laser barrier or something like that, right? So it just shoots a laser beam up and down, and you can have objects kind of limit the direction that they fire in. So they might not ever fire left or right. They only fire up or down, right? And then what you could do is you could have, a really quick movement that goes, like that, like really fast, by using these properties inside of here. So it would kind of widen the amount of the damage range they could do. And since we're done talking about the weapons, I will jump over here to one of the guys that fires a weapon just to show you, because we've already seen how the characters do that. Let's find an object that fires weapons, and that would be under objects. So we've got our rock monster right here, and he uses weapon named rocks, and animation fires weapon. This is a kind of an important one. So at the beginning of his animation, right, which is right here, and I'll just show you that what that looks like. So he's got, this kind of movement where he comes up and he throws the things. You can time in your throwing of the weapon based on that animation fires weapon. So what happens is it's at the beginning of the animation sequence, when it loops back around, that's when there's this trigger to fire the weapon. But you can also put in here a little bit of a delay too, because you notice that my first attack frame, he's still holding onto that rock, right? It's only when he gets to about frame, 4 or 5 that he lets go of it 5. So that's when you want him to appear like he's actually throwing it. And, a little trial and error here, but point 2 was easy to come across, and that made it appear that he actually chucks that weapon. So then, and I'm sorry, I guess I was actually wrong. It's the weapons that determine when you disable firing up or down. So if it's an object throwing the weapon, then, or actually a character too, you can just isolate when they can fire. So for example, what the kit is going to do is it's going to look and figure out the best direction to fire based on where the character is at, if it's an object firing. Okay. But what you could do is say, okay, well, I never want you to fire left or right. So even if the character is, right or left against the object, he's never going to fire to the left. He's always going to fire up and down. And again, that would make sense for maybe like a laser beam that just shoots up and down, and priority is kind of given based on the location. So if you are figuring out whether or not or you isolate it by left or right, okay, well, is the character on the left? Yes. Then in that case, the object is going to fire to the left. and likewise for up or down. Okay, I think that about does it for talking about weapons.